Hello, and welcome back to Next Chapter Woman. First of all, I want to apologize for the austere background here. I am redecorating both my office and my living room, which is the other place that I record my videos, all at the same time. So right now I'm in a really big mess, that in-between chapter of not a renovation, but a redecoration. So I do apologize. It will get better. So come along with me while we make things pretty. So I wanted to talk a little bit about why we feel sometimes uncomfortable after being involved for years with a bunch of responsibilities. I've been noticing something lately that surprised me just a little. For most of my life, things were busy. There was always something that needed attention, something that needed fixing, someone who needed me to step in. And for a long time, that pace just felt normal. It was what I needed to do, so I did it. But then my life changed. Responsibilities changed, and the urgency faded out. And what I expected to feel was relief. But instead, what I felt sometimes was something stronger. I felt calm. And what was surprising about that? Well, calm didn't immediately feel comfortable. I didn't expect that. You would think that after years, sometimes decades of responsibility, the quiet would feel like a reward. But what I've been realizing is that when you've lived in a certain rhythm for a very long time, your nervous system gets used to that rhythm. And urgency becomes familiar, and being needed becomes familiar, and even a certain level of stress becomes familiar. And when that suddenly changes, something inside, it can feel a little disoriented. Not because something's wrong, but because things are finally different. You might recognize this feeling. Life becomes calmer, your days have more space, and yet a small voice inside you sometimes whispers, "Should I be doing more? Did I forget something? Why does this feel so strange?" It's a curious experience, isn't it? Nothing's actually wrong, but the quiet takes a little time to understand. For many women, and honestly for many people, responsibility has been a central part of life for a very long time. We raised our families, we supported our partners, we managed our households, we worked in our careers, we built our careers, and we solved problems. Being the one who shows up when something needs to get done. That's what we did. Over time, that role becomes more than just something we do. It becomes part of how we understand ourselves. Being responsible, being reliable, being the one who holds things together. And there's a lot of meaning in that. It matters. Those years weren't wasted. They were full of purpose, connection, and full of care. But when life begins to change, to shift, as it will, when the demands change or the pace slows down, something starts to happen. The role begins to loosen, and that can feel unfamiliar. It's kind of a strange feeling of quiet. What surprised me was not the calm itself. It was how long it took for calm to feel natural. At first, the quiet can feel like a question mark. You wake up in the morning and you realize that there isn't a long list waiting for you. There isn't an emergency to solve. There isn't a dozen people depending on you before noon. And instead of immediately relaxing into that space, part of you might still feel like you're supposed to be constantly scanning the horizon on the lookout for the next problem. That habit of vigilance, as it were, doesn't disappear overnight, but it does slowly unwind. Something occurred to me recently that helped me understand this better. For many years, calm wasn't the environment that we lived in. It was the exception, the short pause between responsibilities, the quiet moment before the next thing started. So when calm finally becomes the background of life, instead of the exception, it takes time for our mind and our body to adjust. We have to learn how to live in a rhythm that feels slower, more spacious, and less urgent. We have to learn to trust the quiet. And I think that's one of the hidden transitions of this stage of life, learning to trust the quiet. Not rushing to fill it, not assuming that something must be wrong if the pace has changed, just allowing life to be calmer for a while. That doesn't mean that life feels empty or becomes empty. If anything, it often becomes more thoughtful, more reflective, more intentional. But the energy is different. It's less about reacting to situations and more about noticing those situations. Another thing I've been thinking about is how differently success begins to look in this chapter. For most of our lives, success often meant accomplishing more, managing more, solving more. But at some point, a quieter definition starts to come into life. Success might look like peace in your daily rhythm, having time to think, not feeling pulled in 10 directions all at once, being able to enjoy ordinary moments without urgency. It's a very different kind of richness, and it doesn't always make itself known immediately. Sometimes it arrives quietly, and we only recognize it after we've lived with it for a while. Several of the conversations here on this channel explore this transition. What happens when life moves out of survival mode and into something calmer? That shift, as gentle as it sounds, can actually be one of the most profound adjustments of all. There are other reflections here about learning to live without urgency and about what a slower life can begin to feel like. They're all part of the same larger conversation about this next chapter of life. So if life has become a little quieter lately, if the urgency that used to shape your days has softened and toned down, and if part of you is still getting used to that, you're not alone in that experience. It's a very natural transition. Calm doesn't always feel comfortable right away, but over time, something interesting happens. The slower rhythm begins to feel more natural, and one day you realize something you didn't quite expect. Life didn't become smaller, it simply became calmer. And sometimes that turns out to be exactly the kind of richness this chapter was meant to hold. So, as always, enjoy the quiet. You're not alone. Take care of yourself, and bye for now.